Okay. Well, good morning, Joe. It's so great to see you. Today is Thursday, April 2nd. Welcome to Coffee with Ken. I'm Ken Biberaj. I'm managing director with Savills, a leading tenant advisory commercial real estate firm. We are almost at the end of the third week of social distancing as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Today is supposed to be opening day for the Washington Nationals World Series champions. It is not. The stadium is empty, just like all stadiums around the country. And just about an hour ago, the United States jobless claims rate reached 6.6 million unemployment claims. Today's topic is understanding the overall economic impact of the coronavirus domestically and internationally. And couldn't be more excited to have Nobel Prize-winning economist, Columbia University professor, and dear friend Joe Stiglitz with us today. Good morning, Joe.
Nice to be here.
Great to see you. I have my Upper West Side Zabar's coffee mug here. I am ready to get started. But why don't we just jump right in with the jobless numbers? I mean, obviously breaking news and very fortuitous that we have you on. So we'd love to get your first take for our guests.
Not a surprise at all. Economists have said that we're going to be going towards unemployment rates of 20 to 30%. And that doesn't really include disguised unemployment where people are keeping employees on the payroll, but they're not really working full time. So this, you might say, is not a surprise. Some commentary that number underestimates the magnitude of the unemployment we're really experiencing, because many people, I've heard this personally, have not been able to get through to the unemployment office to file their claims. So this is almost surely an underestimate of the number of unemployed. Also reports that in the new bill that was passed, there were provisions for gig workers, freelance workers, people who have not traditionally been covered by unemployment insurance. And it looks like, at least in many states, it's going to be some time before they are able to register as unemployed and to get benefits. So, the idea was really important to get money out to people quickly, because such a large fraction of Americans live week to week, have less than $500 of savings. They miss one paycheck, and they're one paycheck away from disaster. They're now missing two paychecks. And the government isn't responding with the speed that they need. And you saw that so dramatically, in a way very ugly, with even though Congress had intended that, for instance, Social Security recipients be able to automatically get that $1,200 check. And the president said in 2 weeks. Now they're talking about 3 weeks. And then the IRS said, no, you have to file a return. And many of the elderly don't have computers. They're not going to want to, they're the most vulnerable. Are they supposed to go down to some office and get a form? They didn't file, they don't have to file tax returns. It was, I have to say, almost cruel on the part of the Trump administration, what they were doing to the elderly. Fortunately on that, they backed off. But the other administrative problems are really very worrisome in this time of national emergency. And that 6 million number really highlights the stress that so many people are under.
So let's dive in. So last weekend, the president did sign a $2 trillion bill to respond to coronavirus. What do you call this? Is it a stimulus? Is it a relief package? Like, how do you economically define this? And then give us a little bit more insight about what you like and don't like about it, just broadly speaking.
Sure. So I don't like the term stimulus, because the stimulus is what we talked about in 2008, where you needed to stimulate the economy because of deficiency in aggregate demand. That's what a stimulus is. The reason our economy is not functioning is not lack of aggregate demand. It's this nasty virus, which people don't want to get close to each other, which means they can't buy and they can't go to restaurants, they can't go to your sports stadium, and they can't produce, they can't work together in factories. That's what's going on. So I think the best way to think about it is, first, it's trying to protect us against a more rapid spread of the disease and respond to the health needs. Again, striking that there was such a fight to get adequate provision for our hospitals, $100 billion. They had to fight for that. They didn't really adequately deal with the problem of the shortage of masks and ventilators. We already have a law on the books that gives the government the capacity to do it, and the administration's been very slow to invoke that. Another element of responding to the health crisis is making sure that the states, which are on the front line, have the resources. That didn't happen. Governor Cuomo was very clear that he's not getting enough money even to fight to pay for the increased cost of fighting the disease. So we're in that part, we're failing. The earlier bill also that tried to deal with the health issues, where we said we don't want sick people going to work and spreading the disease. And they recognized the principle. But then the big companies' lobbyists came in, and 80% of American workers were exempt from the provision for paid sick leave. Right? Unbelievable. We began in the worst position among the advanced countries, and we remain in that respect. So that's the first part. The second part is maybe the word you call relief, helping those who are very vulnerable. Here, there's an important principle that was at play. Normally we worry a lot about targeting. We worry about are we giving money to people who don't need it? Are we causing what we call moral hazard, adverse incentive effects? Here, those considerations should be second order. The issue here is, for no fault of their own, people are losing their jobs. We need to get them money, and quickly, because of the extreme vulnerability of such a large fraction of American population. So that's number one. And we did a pretty good job. But I talked about the impediments in getting those $1,200 checks to everybody. One of the things that Denmark and the UK have done, and the US is, and France and the US has finally included that in the bill after some pushing, was to give money to employers to allow them to keep the employees on the payroll, particularly important in the United States because of most Americans get health insurance through their employer, unlike other countries. And that means that they lose their job. It puts an enormous burden on Medicaid, or they don't have any health in coverage. And in a time of a pandemic is the worst time. You want people to be without health coverage. So that was an important part of the bill. Another part was a stay on evictions and foreclosures on government-insured properties, and a stay on interest on government student loans. But that left a vast array of other debt due, other foreclosures, other evictions. Every other aspect of the economy is on hold, but the banks say, no, we're not on hold. We're going to get your money anyway. We're going to get your interest anyway. And if you don't pay on time on your credit card, you're going to pay extra fees. I'd like to hear from the banks saying every part of our economy is on a stay. We're going to have a stay on interest and extra fees. So that was the second part, relief, and pretty good, but not good enough. And then the final part is preparing us to get out for the recovery. And here, the critical thing is to make sure that American enterprises are able to get back to work. And that won't happen if they go bankrupt. And that's where the loan program from small and medium-sized enterprises is important. The grants, the loan, the provisions of money, the bailouts for our big corporations. Here, there are two concerns that I have. The first is there were insufficient conditionalities. The American people are giving lots of money to lots of big corporations. This follows a huge gift in December of 2017. They didn't use that money to invest in America. They used that money for share buybacks, over almost $1 trillion of share buybacks in 2018 alone. And that meant they could have built up their capital buffers. They chose not to. And that's why they're in such a frail position. So we're asked to pick up the tab again because of their mismanagement. And I think we ought to exert a heavy price. Now, one of the things I find so disturbing is our airlines, which obviously suffered a great deal, but they're refusing to cooperate with the CDC, with the Center for Disease Control, in helping trace people who, somebody is sitting next to somebody who comes down with the coronavirus. They say, no, $60 billion is not enough. If you want us to do that, you have to give us more money. Incredible. It really, we would say in New York, chutzpah to do that kind, to say 60 billion, we still want more money if we're going to help you trace this disease. And our airlines, have got a really bad reputation for the way they treated their customers. I think they're going to get another bad reputation for this.
No, so you mentioned Denmark. I mean, one of the things that I found so interesting is just how different certain aspects of society are reacting, right? I think some countries are handling it a lot differently. I think states are handling it differently domestically. What are you seeing and how do you compare? Who's doing it well? You mentioned Denmark. I mean, I think that was a pretty fascinating case about how quickly they've approached kind of freezing the economy. Like, what does that even mean? Like, how do you view that? And then what do you think other countries have done, or even with the states?
The key issue here is understanding the disease itself, understanding contagion, the idea of contagion. Very simple mathematical models. Do the details is more complicated, but the basic mathematics is really quite simple. Understanding that when you have a contagious disease, it grows exponentially. And so the fact that you see, as President Trump said, 15 cases, and that means, we don't have anything to worry about, that's utter foolishness. So understanding, looking at what are the key coefficients, is this going to be something that's going to be contained or not? You realized for this particular disease, it was very contagious, and therefore physical distancing was really important. And so that is necessary for containing the disease. And that inevitably means putting certain parts of the economy on hold. The parts that can't be done by remote video like this. So, or my writing, and our classes are going on Zoom. So that they realized that very early. They realized that the kind of dichotomy, the kind of position that the government takes is really important. And when the government says something like there's a trade-off, that's wrong and misleading. So they realized that if the disease is ravishing the country, it's going to ravish the economy, no matter what you say or do. So let's put the disease number one, controlling the disease, and that means putting on hold the economy. And the quicker we get the disease under control, the quicker we can get the economy back to working. The third thing that was really important in Denmark, there's a lot of trust in government.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't have a government, leaders that lie 5 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't have trust in government, you don't have leadership, and you need leadership here to give guidance. Guidance, because this is a social phenomenon. People have to stay at home. We don't have an authoritarian regime, so it's voluntary. But you need leadership to give guidance to people of what they should do. The worst case around the world is probably Bolsonaro in Brazil. He says, even now, there's no problem. I get calls from my friends in Brazil. They can't believe what's going on, and they're really scared. Yeah. And some people follow him. Some of the countries in Europe, South Korea, really did it well. Yep. Singapore really did it well. Now, South Korea is a particularly interesting example because it was a very democratic country. So you don't need authoritarianism to bring this under control. You need competence on the part of government. You need testing, and we didn't have testing. So that's a particularly illustrative case for me on good governance, good government, trust, understanding science, not attacking science. Now that's really another lesson that's coming out of it, 2 important lessons coming out of this: preparedness and understanding science. And when you attack scientific experts, of course, you undermine the credibility of any response. We're not going to, I hate to say it, the politicians are only as good as the scientists that back them up, and the credibility we give to those scientists. And our scientists, like Dr. Fauci, done a fantastic job under very difficult circumstances.
Well, I think there's 2 aspects of this, right? If you have a strong economy, that would hopefully help buffer this, but then also just a strong social and kind of governmental fabric. And for a long time, we've had these conversations. We just haven't been necessarily in a strong position, right? There really is a large and growing income inequality gap, and I think now all of this is being amplified. I mean, how much worse off are we because of decisions over the last decades that are really kind of being exacerbated right now? I mean, how do you see all this even just worse here? I mean,
oh, very, very much so. And let me just give you a couple of illustrations. I mentioned one already, the fact that such a large fraction of Americans are on the edge, $500 or less in the bank account. That means they can't go without 1 or 2 paychecks. Another important aspect of America's inequality is inequality in health. We are the only advanced country that doesn't recognize the right of access to healthcare as a basic human right. We have enormous disparities in access in health. So the life expectancy of the healthiest, of the richest, is years longer than that of the poorest. And that's going to be very important in this disease, because this nasty virus really goes after people who have other health problems. And America is probably among the advanced countries, the least prepared, least able to cope. So life expectancy in the United States is today lower than it was in 2016. The life expectancy, morbidity, all these things have been getting worse in the United States. And for this disease to come on in that context is particularly troublesome.
Yeah.
The third thing is we don't have as good a social protection system. So people fall through the cracks much more easily. And that means we can't respond as effectively. The irony is that many of the emerging markets in developing countries are, in that sense, a little bit better prepared.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you one example. Argentina decided that in the face of this crisis, with so many children living in poverty, there needed to be money given to the children to keep them away from starvation. They made a decision on Tuesday, and by Friday of that same week, the people had gotten the money. We're not able to do that.
Yeah.
They had in place a social protection system inhibited by lack of resources to, that's why children are in poverty. So they're a poorer country, but they had set up the administrative framework to handle a crisis. So that's another example of how different countries have responded differently.
Yeah. So let's we had last weekend the $2 trillion package relief put together, the bill passed. There's already talk about what's next. Speaker Pelosi is talking about it. The president's called for another $2 trillion investment package. From today forward, what do we need to be doing? Is it more of a jobs program? Is it more health related? What are the steps that need to be taken from a government perspective, but also as individual ordinary citizens? We have a question box at the bottom. You could add questions if any of our listeners want to put in, but somebody just asked, what can we as ordinary citizens be doing as well?
Well, first, I would begin with the question, what were the gaps in the bill? What were the areas that were left uncovered? And I mentioned a couple already. There were two big gaps. Understandable, you might say. In American politics, money matters. And those with the biggest lobbyists, the most well-paid lobbyists, were down in Washington lobbying. The swamp is really deep and running well.
Yeah.
And we saw it in the bill. The airline companies got a lot of money. What didn't get a lot of money? The state and localities. And Governor Cuomo, for instance, talked about not even getting the money to deal with today's crisis. But looking forward, we know that state revenues are going to plummet. With the economy going down, state revenues are going to go down. That's the reality. Now, the states have balanced budget frameworks. That is to say, if the revenues go down, they have to cut their spending. They're not like the government, the federal government, that can run a deficit. So there is an urgent need for a revenue sharing program where the government supports the states and localities. And let's be clear, what happens if we don't do that? We're going to have to cut back healthcare. We're going to have to cut back education. We're going to have to cut back some basic programs that help our most vulnerable people. So this is really important in terms of where our economy is going to be. And it's not only an economic impact, it will be a societal impact. The second thing we didn't do, their lobbyists weren't there. You can blame them for not spending more money in lobbying, but they had other things to do, are the NGOs, our universities. Those are the basis of our future. Why is the United States leading the world in technology? It's because we led the world in research, and that was out of our research universities, Stanford, Berkeley, Harvard, Columbia, MIT, Caltech. And those are being devastated. Their endowments are down, their student revenues will be down. All the revenue streams are going to be down. And that means unless we give these institutions more help, our future growth will be imperiled. So that's one set of things that we need. A lot of the discussion on the second round, the third or fourth round of the response has been on infrastructure, and that we need the infrastructure. That's very clear, but we needed the infrastructure in 2008 when we went into the financial crisis, and we should remember the discussions we had 12 years ago. I may be one of the people, the few people that remember those discussions, but the point of those discussions was you wanted the money to get out quickly and to be used well with no corruption. And the problem with infrastructure is you can't get that money out quickly with appropriate oversight. So let me give you an example. You build a road. You can't just build a road. You have to acquire the land under the road. You have to get contracts. We believe in very transparent processes so that people can see what's going on. And in the bill that was passed in 2009, the stimulus package, there was very good oversight. But the consequence of that very good oversight is the flow of money was slowed down. There were some things you could do very quickly, swimming pools, refurbishing schools. There's some important things that can be done. But there's no doubt we are not going to build airports and roads and bridges in a year or in 6 months. And so that talk of infrastructure is totally unmatched to the needs that we're going to have to get out of this economic downturn. Not a surprise that the administration doesn't understand this. They've not been known for their the keenness of their economic insights, let alone their health insights. But I hope that Congress, in its deliberative process, comes to understand this.
So we have a couple minutes left, and we're so grateful you've taken the time to be with us. These are dire, extraordinary times, and it really seems that it's only getting worse every single day. What type of silver lining might there be as a result of all this? Whether it's rethinking how we address healthcare or thinking about social safety net, what do you see as some potential silver lining that may benefit the country overall as we try to swing out of this?
Well, I think there are a couple silver linings. First, it will help us rethink the appropriate balance between the government and the private sector, understand basically what we need to do to have a government prepared for the kind of crisis, understand a little bit better the shortcomings of the private sector, the fact that it wasn't able to even produce the masks. That's one of the main themes in my book, People, Power, and Profits, Progressive Capitalism, that we had a conversation about. When we have a crisis like this, as we did in 2001 and 2008, we turn to the government. We turn to government in times of emergency. But because of the assault on government, beginning back with the Reagan era, government is less prepared to deal with these emergencies. And we have to strengthen our government. The second thing is we should have understand the importance of science. The reason that we were able so quickly to diagnose what the problem was, to see this virus, to understand its genetic structure, to begin work on the virus, on the vaccine, to begin work on the antiviral, is because of science. And for the past 3 years, every year, the Trump administration has proposed a 30% cut in the science budgets. They proposed a cut in the CDC, the front line of protecting us against contagious diseases. So We need to support science, and our universities and what I would say more broadly, our truth-telling institutions, truth assessing, truth dissemination. That's absolutely critical.
That's right.
Thirdly, we've been running our economy in a too-taut way. So reflection, a little bit of our short-sightedness. Many American cars took away the spare tire. Normally, we don't need a spare tire. Normally, you don't have a flat tire. Absolutely right. But when you have a spare tire, you need it. And the cost of not having it is enormous. That risk efficiency trade-off, short-termism, dominated all of the thinking on both the private sector and unfortunately also more recently in the public sector. We let our stockpiles be eviscerated.
Yeah.
And that is something I hope we will learn, and so we won't do that again.
Sure. Well, listen, I feel like we could go on for hours. I'm so grateful you took the time to be here for one of our virtual Coffee with Kens. Our next talk is actually going to be Monday at 10 a.m. with Cyrus Massouni. Cyrus is the founder of ZocDoc, and we're going to talk about innovation during COVID-19. Joe, I want to thank you again for being here. You're obviously still in New York, so we want you to follow Governor Cuomo's rules, right? And we end every one of these talks with stay home, stop the spread, and save lives. Thank you again, Testanya, and we'll talk to you soon.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Take care, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.